The morning sun slowly rose over Dubai, casting a golden light across the city's glass towers. Inside one of the most luxurious hotels, the staff was already busy preparing for another hectic day. Among them was Layla, a young woman with kind eyes and a calm smile. She tied her black apron around her waist, tucked her hair neatly under her cap, and took a deep breath before stepping into the restaurant. It was another long day of serving people who rarely noticed her, but Layla had learned to carry herself with quiet dignity. Layla had been working at this five-star hotel for almost 2 years. She wasn't born into wealth like most of the guests she served. In fact, she came from a small town where life was simple but full of struggles. Her father had passed away when she was just 16, and since then, she had taken on the responsibility of caring for her younger brother, Amir. Every morning, she reminded herself why she worked so hard, to give Amir the education she never got to finish. That thought kept her strong, even on the toughest days. The restaurant smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries. The sound of clinking plates and the soft hum of background music filled the air. Layla moved gracefully between tables, greeting guests with a polite smile and gentle voice. "Good morning, sir. Would you like tea or coffee?" she would ask, her tone always respectful. Most guests responded with a nod or a distracted yes, hardly looking at her. But Layla didn't mind. She had learned that kindness didn't depend on how others treated you. It was something you carried inside yourself. Her co-workers admired her patience. Even when guests snapped their fingers or made rude comments, Layla never lost her temper. "You're too calm for this job," one of the new waiters joked once. Layla just smiled and replied softly, "Anger only makes the day longer." That was her secret. She never allowed rudeness to break her spirit. Still, there were moments when exhaustion weighed on her. Working 2 shifts, one at the hotel and another part-time at a small cafe, left her with little rest. But every time she received her paycheck and sent money to Amir for his school fees, her tiredness felt lighter. She dreamed that one day he would graduate and get a good job, freeing them both from this endless cycle of struggle. That morning seemed no different from any other. The sun poured through the tall glass windows, making the marble floors shine. Wealthy businessmen, tourists, and local elites filled the tables, talking about meetings, investments, and travel plans. Layla's eyes quickly scanned the room. Everything had to be perfect. She straightened a few chairs, adjusted a napkin, and made sure every table setting was flawless. She didn't want any guest to find a single mistake. As she walked to the service counter, her manager called out, "Layla, make sure the VIP table is handled carefully today. A special guest is coming." She nodded immediately, her professional smile never fading. She had no idea that this special guest would soon test her patience like no one ever had. A few minutes later, Layla heard the sound of expensive shoes tapping on the marble floor and the murmur of staff rushing to attention. Security guards stood near the entrance, and a tall, well-dressed man walked in with a confident, almost arrogant stride. His expensive suit, designer watch, and the respectful bows of his assistants made it clear this was someone powerful. Layla quickly guessed he was the VIP guest her manager had mentioned. But before he even reached his table, Layla noticed something else: the way he looked at people. His eyes were sharp, almost cold, scanning the room as if everything around him was beneath him. She had met many rich guests, but something about this man felt different. There was a sense of authority, but also arrogance, like he believed the world existed only to serve him. Layla tried to push away her nervousness. She reminded herself that every guest deserved respect, no matter how they behaved. She took his order pad, fixed her posture, and walked toward his table with a polite smile. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Welcome to our restaurant. May I take your order?" The man didn't even look at her. Instead, he kept scrolling through his phone. After a few seconds, without raising his head, he said in a low, commanding voice, "Just bring me Turkish coffee. Make it quick." Layla nodded, still keeping her tone gentle. "Of course, sir. Would you like sugar with it?" This time, he lifted his eyes and gave her a hard stare. "Didn't you hear me? I said just bring it," he replied sharply, his tone dripping with annoyance. Layla's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Yes, sir," she said quietly before walking away. Her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't angry. She was used to rude customers. But there was something about the way he dismissed her that made her feel smaller than she had in a long time. As she prepared his coffee behind the counter, one of her co-workers whispered, "That's Sheikh Omar Al-Hamadi, one of the richest men in the UAE. Be careful with him. He's known for being difficult." Layla just nodded, focusing on her task. She carefully poured the coffee, checked the temperature, and placed it neatly on a silver tray. She had no idea that this simple act of service would soon lead to an unforgettable moment, one that would change her life forever. She took a deep breath and carried the tray to the table. Her steps were steady, her hands firm. "Here's your coffee, sir," she said softly as she placed it in front of him. At that moment, the sheikh finally looked at her, not with warmth, but with judgment, as if trying to decide whether she was even worthy of serving him. Layla could feel his eyes on her, but she stood tall, refusing to let his arrogance shake her. She reminded herself, "I am not less than anyone. I'm just doing my job." That thought gave her strength. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of an encounter that would test her patience, reveal her hidden strength, and shock the arrogant sheikh in a way he would never forget. The moment Sheikh Omar Al-Hamadi entered the restaurant, the atmosphere changed completely. Every staff member straightened their posture, and the soft chatter in the room slowly faded. The man had an air of power that could be felt even without him saying a word. His expensive white suit looked freshly pressed, his golden cufflinks glimmered under the chandelier, and his polished black shoes clicked sharply on the marble floor. People whispered his name with respect or fear. He was not just rich, he was one of the most powerful businessmen in the Middle East. Layla, standing near the counter, noticed how everyone reacted to him. She had served many wealthy guests before, but this man's presence made even the managers nervous. His security guards scanned the area before letting him sit down. Layla could already tell that this wasn't going to be an easy guest. Still, she reminded herself of her job, to serve with patience and professionalism, no matter who the customer was. The sheikh sat down at the VIP table reserved for him. He didn't look around to admire the restaurant's elegant design or the view of the Dubai skyline. Instead, he focused on his phone, typing something quickly while his assistants stood a few feet away, waiting for his signal. His face showed no emotion. It was the kind of face that had seen power for too long, cold, confident, and used to being obeyed. Layla took a deep breath and approached the table with a friendly smile. Her uniform was neat, her voice calm, and her posture straight. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Royal Pearl restaurant," she said softly. "Would you like to start with coffee or breakfast?" The sheikh didn't even lift his head. He kept his eyes on his phone and replied in a bored tone, "Just bring coffee." Turkish. Layla hesitated for a second, unsure if he preferred sugar or not. Wanting to be polite, she asked gently, "Would you like sugar with that, sir?" This time he looked up. His eyes were sharp and cold, and his expression turned into irritation. "Didn't you hear what I said?" he snapped. "Just coffee. Do I need to explain everything?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a harsh authority that made Layla's stomach twist. Layla blinked and quickly nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll bring it right away." She turned away, keeping her head down. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked back to the counter. She could hear a few quiet laughs from the sheikh's assistants, who found amusement in how easily he had dismissed her. It wasn't the first time she'd been spoken to rudely, but something about this man's tone cut deeper. As she prepared the coffee, her co-worker Aisha whispered, "Be careful with him. That's Sheikh Omar Al-Hamadi. He owns half the hotels on this street. He doesn't like to be questioned." Layla simply nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm just doing my job," she said quietly. Inside, though, she felt a mix of sadness and frustration. She didn't understand why some people treated service workers like they were invisible. Did they think kindness was only for equals? When the coffee was ready, Layla made sure everything was perfect. She placed the golden cup carefully on a tray, adjusted the small saucer, and checked the temperature. Her goal was simple, to serve flawlessly so that no one could complain. She took a deep breath and walked toward the Sheikh's table again, her steps calm and careful. She placed the cup in front of him and said softly, "Your Turkish coffee, sir." The Sheikh didn't respond. He was busy checking his watch, scrolling through messages, and giving instructions to one of his men in Arabic. Layla didn't understand everything they were saying, but she caught a few words. Something about an investment meeting and a shipment delay. His tone grew angrier by the minute. When Layla tried to move a napkin closer to his plate, a single drop of coffee slipped from the edge of the cup onto the white tablecloth. It was barely noticeable, but the Sheikh noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. He put his phone down slowly, his expression changing from annoyance to anger. "What is this?" he said coldly, pointing at the tiny stain. Layla quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clean it right away." She grabbed a napkin, her voice shaking slightly, but before she could wipe it, he stopped her with a sharp gesture. "Do you even know how to serve?" he said harshly. "Is this how you treat your guests? I'm paying for luxury, not clumsy service." His voice grew louder with each word, and now everyone nearby was staring. The other guests turned their heads, curious about the commotion. Layla's cheeks turned red. She wanted to disappear. Her throat tightened, but she stayed calm. "I truly apologize, sir. It was an accident. I'll replace the cup immediately," she said softly. The Sheikh leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Accident?" he repeated mockingly. "That's what people say when they can't do their jobs properly." His assistants chuckled quietly behind him, clearly enjoying the scene. Layla bit her lip. She could feel the sting of humiliation, but she refused to show anger. She simply bowed her head slightly and said, "I understand, sir. I'll fix it right away." Then she walked back to the counter with trembling hands, her heart heavy but her face still composed. From the corner of her eye, she saw her manager watching nervously. He whispered, "Just be patient, Layla. Don't argue with him. That man has power you don't want to challenge." Layla nodded, but deep inside, she couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. She wasn't angry because of his wealth. She was hurt because he treated her like she didn't matter at all. She had always believed that respect had nothing to do with money, but in that moment, it felt like the world worked differently for people like her. As she stood behind the counter, waiting for the next order, she glanced back at the Sheikh. He had already gone back to his phone, acting as if nothing had happened. The laughter of his assistants still echoed in her ears. She took another deep breath and told herself, "Stay calm, Layla. You can't let this break you." She didn't know that this small act of patience, her silence and dignity in the face of arrogance, was setting the stage for something extraordinary. Soon, the same man who had just humiliated her would be shocked in a way he would never forget. The restaurant was filled with the gentle hum of voices, soft music, and the smell of roasted coffee beans. It was supposed to be a calm morning, but for Layla, everything felt heavy after the way Sheikh Omar had spoken to her. She tried to push away the sting of his words and focus on her work. She reminded herself, as she always did, that one rude customer didn't define her worth. But deep inside, the embarrassment lingered like a shadow. She stood behind the counter, waiting for the coffee machine to finish brewing another cup. Her hands moved automatically, pouring, wiping, checking the tray, but her mind was far away. She thought about Amir, her younger brother, and how proud he was of her for working in such a famous hotel. He always said, "One day, you'll have your own restaurant, Layla." But right now, she couldn't even stand up for herself. When the coffee was ready, she placed it carefully on a silver tray again. She made sure the cup was spotless, the handle turned the right way, and the napkin folded perfectly. There was no room for another mistake. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked back to Sheikh Omar's table. He was still on his phone, his expression serious. Two of his assistants stood nearby, whispering to each other. Layla gently placed the new cup in front of him. "Here's your fresh coffee, sir," she said softly, her voice calm but polite. For a moment he didn't respond. Then he finally looked up, his cold eyes meeting hers. He muttered, glancing at the cup as if inspecting it for flaws. Layla waited silently, hoping he wouldn't find anything wrong. But just as she was about to step back, one of his assistants said something in Arabic that made the Sheikh smirk. The man laughed quietly, and Layla didn't understand the words, but she could tell it wasn't kind. The Sheikh turned to her again and asked sharply, "Do you even know who I am?" Layla froze for a second. She had heard his name, of course. Everyone knew who he was. Sheikh Omar al-Hamadi, a billionaire businessman who owned several hotels, companies, and luxury properties across the Middle East. But she didn't know what to say. "You are one of our most respected guests, sir," she replied carefully. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Respected guest?" he repeated with a mocking smile. "You think respect means bringing me coffee? Do you know how much this place costs to run in a day? You couldn't earn that in a year." His tone was cruel, almost as if he wanted to see her break. Layla's heart sank. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Guests at nearby tables began to glance their way, sensing the tension. Some looked uncomfortable, while others pretended not to hear. Layla's co-workers froze behind the counter, not knowing whether to step in or stay out of it. "I'm sorry, sir," Layla said quietly, her eyes lowered. "I didn't mean any disrespect." But her calmness seemed to irritate him even more. "Sorry?" he repeated loudly, his voice echoing through the restaurant. "Do you think sorry fixes everything? If you can't even serve properly, why are you here? Are you that desperate for money?" A few people gasped. The assistants chuckled again, and Layla felt her chest tighten. Every word felt like a slap. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Crying would only give him satisfaction. She slowly picked up the empty tray and said softly, "Please enjoy your coffee, sir." She turned to leave, hoping the moment would pass, but the Sheikh wasn't done. "Wait," he said sharply. Layla stopped, her back still facing him. "Tell me," he continued, "how much do they pay you here?" "Enough to smile at rich people all day." Layla turned around slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. "I am just doing my job, sir," she replied quietly. "I'm happy to serve." The Sheikh laughed, a cold, mocking sound that cut through the silence of the restaurant. "Happy to serve?" he repeated. "That's what servants always say. You people should be grateful someone gives you work at all." That was the moment everyone in the room realized. This wasn't just a simple outburst. It was humiliation. Layla stood frozen, clutching the tray tightly. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Her manager took a small step forward but stopped, clearly afraid to interfere. No one dared to interrupt a man as powerful as Sheikh Omar. Layla's heart pounded in her chest. For years, she had faced rude customers, arrogant tourists, and impatient businessmen, but never like this. The difference was that this time, the insult wasn't just about her work. It was about her dignity. Inside, something shifted. She had always believed that silence was strength, that patience showed character. But standing there, being treated like she was nothing, she realized patience had a limit. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman who worked hard, spoke 3 languages, and carried the weight of her family on her shoulders. Why should she be ashamed of that? She looked up at him again. For a moment, she almost spoke, but then stopped herself. It wasn't time yet. She could feel the anger rising inside her, but she held it back, her face calm. She knew that reacting in anger would only make things worse. The Sheikh sipped his coffee and muttered, "At least this cup is better. Try not to spill it next time." He didn't even look at her as he said it. The laughter of his assistants followed, low but cruel. Layla nodded silently, then walked away. Every step felt heavy, but there was also a strange kind of strength growing inside her. She had been humiliated, yes, but she wouldn't let it end like this. She promised herself that if fate gave her even a small chance to speak, she would not stay silent again. Back at the counter, Aisha touched her arm gently. "Layla, are you okay?" she whispered. Layla smiled faintly, though her eyes were glassy. "I'm fine," she said softly. "People like him, They think money gives them power over everyone. But one day, he'll learn it doesn't. She didn't know how true her words would soon become, because in just a few minutes, something would happen that no one in the restaurant could have predicted. Something that would leave even the arrogant Sheikh Omar speechless. Layla stood behind the counter, trying to steady her breathing as the Sheikh's words echoed in her mind. The humiliation she had faced moments ago still stung, but she refused to let it control her. She wiped her hands on her apron, even though they were already clean, and forced herself to focus on her next task. She had learned long ago that patience was a kind of strength, a shield against people who thought they could walk over you. Today, that shield was being tested like never before. For years, Layla had faced challenges that most people could not imagine. Losing her father at a young age had forced her to grow up faster than anyone expected. She had taken care of her younger brother, Amir, since he was a small child, working multiple jobs to pay for his education and basic needs. Her life had been full of responsibility, and she had learned to navigate difficult situations without breaking down. That morning, she drew upon that same inner strength as she prepared for whatever the rest of her shift would bring. She glanced at the other tables in the restaurant. Guests chatted happily, oblivious to the tension at the VIP table. Some looked at her curiously, noticing her slight pause before returning to her duties, but most were too absorbed in their own conversations. Layla moved carefully among them, refilling water glasses, collecting plates, and offering polite smiles. Her hands moved quickly, her mind focused, but inside she was reflecting on what had just happened. The Sheikh was still seated, reviewing documents on his tablet. His assistants whispered quietly beside him, occasionally glancing at Layla as she worked. She could feel their judgment, as if they were silently saying, "Look at her. Does she even know who she's dealing with?" But Layla ignored them. She reminded herself that her worth was not defined by anyone's opinion, no matter how powerful. As she walked past a table of tourists, she overheard one woman remark, "That man is terrifying. Look at how he treats the staff." Layla's heart tightened. She didn't want pity, and she certainly didn't want sympathy. She wanted fairness. She wanted people to understand that serving guests with dignity didn't make her any less capable or intelligent than anyone else in the room. Returning to the counter, she paused for a moment and took a deep breath. She thought about her father's advice, words he had shared before his death. Respect is earned through patience, not pride. Speak only when the moment is right. She had always carried those words with her, repeating them silently whenever she faced difficult guests. Today, those words felt especially important. Layla's mind also drifted to her brother. Amir often reminded her of the importance of standing tall, even in small ways. He believed in her completely, and she couldn't let him down. She had to keep her composure, no matter how hard it felt. She thought about how each small act of professionalism, each smile, each polite response, each careful movement, was part of a bigger story of her life. She was not just a waitress. She was someone with dreams, someone who had fought through hardship, and someone who refused to be diminished by arrogance. As she carried another tray of drinks to a table, she practiced her inner calm. She told herself that she could handle anything. "This is just one person," she whispered quietly in her mind. "He is powerful, yes, but his words do not define me. My life, my choices, and my efforts are what matter." Her reflection was interrupted when she noticed the Sheikh glancing in her direction. His piercing eyes seemed to assess her silently, as if trying to find a crack in her composure. Layla didn't flinch. Instead, she held his gaze briefly before looking away politely. She could feel the tension building again, the unspoken challenge lingering in the air. She realized that the next moments would require more than just patience. They would require courage. She returned to the kitchen to prepare more coffee, her hands steady but her heart pounding. She thought about how she had always dreamed of traveling, learning new languages, and meeting people from all over the world. Her education had been interrupted, but she had never stopped learning. She had taught herself Arabic, English, and French, practicing late into the night after her shifts. That knowledge, hidden behind her apron and quiet demeanor, was her secret strength. The more she thought about it, the more determined she became. She would not let Sheikh Omar's arrogance crush her spirit. She would find a way to show that she was more than a simple waitress. But she also knew she had to wait for the right moment. Speaking in anger now would only confirm his assumptions about people like her. She had to be clever, respectful, and firm, qualities that would leave an impression far stronger than a heated argument. She moved among the tables, refilling glasses, collecting plates, and keeping a polite smile on her face. Each interaction, no matter how small, reminded her of her capability. She realized that humility was not the same as weakness. Being calm in the face of insult, being patient when treated unfairly, and maintaining dignity even under pressure were acts of courage in their own right. After a while, she paused near the VIP table again, pretending to adjust a chair. She glanced at Sheikh Omar and noticed a slight shift in his demeanor. For a brief second, he seemed curious rather than arrogant. Layla's heart skipped a beat. Could it be possible that he had underestimated her? Could it be that the patience and strength she had practiced silently were about to make him see her differently? She took another deep breath and reminded herself of the moment that could define everything. This was her opportunity to show her true self. Not with anger, not with fear, but with intelligence, confidence, and respect. Every step she had taken to reach this point, every hardship, every late night studying, every act of kindness she had shown to others, had prepared her for this. Layla returned to the kitchen, her movements calm and deliberate. She felt a quiet excitement building inside her. She was ready. The moment would come when she could reveal that she was not just a waitress, that she had skills, knowledge, and courage that even a powerful man like Sheikh Omar would have to acknowledge. And in that moment, as she polished the last coffee cup and set it carefully on the tray, she understood something important. Strength was not about fighting back immediately. Strength was about waiting for the right moment, preparing yourself, and acting with wisdom and confidence. She smiled faintly to herself, knowing that when the time came, Sheikh Omar would be the one who was surprised, not her. Layla's silent strength had been growing all morning, unnoticed by the other guests and even by the Sheikh. But it was there, ready to emerge, ready to turn the tables in a way no one could expect. And very soon it would. Layla had been holding back all morning. Every insult, every cold glance, every mocking word from Sheikh Omar had tested her patience. She had stayed silent, calm, and professional, even though inside she felt a storm of emotions, embarrassment, frustration, and a quiet determination. But now, as she stood near his table, something inside her shifted. She realized that it was time to speak. Not angrily, not disrespectfully, but in a way that would show him exactly who she was. She took a deep breath and walked toward the VIP table, her steps slow but confident. The tray in her hand seemed heavier than usual, not because of the coffee cup, but because of the moment that had arrived. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained calm. She glanced at the Sheikh, who was still absorbed in his tablet, and for the first time, she noticed the arrogance in his expression. The sense that he expected everyone around him to cower in his presence. Layla stopped a few feet away and waited for his attention. When he looked up briefly, she smiled politely. "Sir," she said softly, then paused, collecting her courage. This time, she spoke in flawless Arabic, her tone steady and respectful, but firm. "With all due respect, sir," she said, "true greatness is not measured by wealth, power, or possessions. True greatness is measured by how you treat the people around you, those who serve, those who care, and those who trust you." The restaurant went silent. Even the background music seemed to fade as the words reached Sheikh Omar. For a moment, he blinked in surprise, unsure if he had heard correctly. Layla's Arabic was perfect, precise, eloquent, and confident. Her accent was clear, her pronunciation flawless. The tone she used commanded respect without being rude, and the words she chose struck directly at the arrogance he had carried like armor. The assistants froze in place. They had never heard anyone speak to Sheikh Omar in such a way, especially not a young waitress. Some of them whispered to each other, astonished by her courage. One of them even muttered under their breath, "Who does she think she is?" Sheikh Omar leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For the first time that morning, he wasn't speaking. He was listening. He studied her closely, almost like he was trying to figure out if she had somehow memorized a speech from someone else. But there was no script. This was genuine. This was Layla, standing tall, speaking the truth in a way he couldn't ignore. Layla continued, her voice calm but filled with quiet power. "A person's wealth can buy many things," she said, "but it cannot buy respect, kindness, or integrity. If you judge people only by what they can give you, you will never understand what it truly means to be great." The words hung in the air. Guests nearby glanced at the scene, sensing the tension. No one had ever dared to speak like that to Sheikh Omar. He was used to people flattering him, obeying him, and avoiding eye contact. But here was a young woman, a waitress, speaking openly, without fear, and with perfect clarity. For a few moments, the Sheikh said nothing. He simply looked at her, his sharp eyes softened slightly, as if he was finally seeing her for who she truly was. The arrogance that had defined his presence seemed to falter. His assistants shifted nervously, realizing that the moment was not going as they expected. Layla felt her own nerves settle. Speaking in Arabic was more than just language. It was a bridge, a way to connect on a level the Sheikh couldn't ignore. It was a reminder that she was educated, intelligent, and capable. That beneath her uniform, she had knowledge and skills that demanded respect. "Do you understand what I mean, sir?" she asked gently, her eyes meeting his without fear. The Sheikh nodded slowly. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter than before. "Yes, I understand," he admitted. "You speak very well." Layla's heart skipped a beat. She had not only held her ground, but she had also earned recognition in the most unexpected way. She smiled faintly, knowing that the moment had shifted. The balance of power in the room had changed. She was no longer just a waitress being humiliated. She was someone who had claimed her dignity with words, intelligence, and courage. He gestured to one of his assistants. "Translate what she just said," he ordered. The assistant repeated her words in English, and the Sheikh listened carefully. His expression softened further. There was admiration, yes, but also a hint of shame. He realized that his behavior earlier had been cruel and unnecessary. The respect that Layla demanded with her words was real, earned not through wealth or power, but through truth and courage. Layla stood quietly, giving him the space to process. She didn't smile arrogantly, nor did she boast. Her confidence came from knowing that she had acted with integrity. She had spoken at the right moment with respect and with intelligence, qualities that money could never buy. The other guests, now watching with fascination, whispered among themselves. Many were inspired by her bravery. Some even thought about how they themselves had treated service staff in the past. Layla's words had created a ripple in the room, changing the energy and forcing everyone to reconsider what it meant to respect another human being. The Sheikh finally spoke again, his voice calm but sincere. "You are a remarkable young woman," he said, the arrogance replaced by acknowledgement. "I underestimated you." Layla nodded politely, her heart racing but her expression composed. She had not sought praise. She had only sought to claim her dignity and speak her truth. Yet the recognition from one of the most powerful men in the room was a confirmation that sometimes courage, patience, and intelligence were stronger than wealth, influence, or intimidation. That single moment, her flawless Arabic, her composed demeanor, and her carefully chosen words, had changed the dynamics completely. She had turned humiliation into strength, arrogance into reflection, and disrespect into recognition. Sheikh Omar al-Hamadi, the man who had seemed untouchable, had been quietly shocked by a young woman who refused to be silenced. And in that instant, Layla realized something important. Courage was not about yelling, nor about confrontation. True courage was speaking the truth, standing tall, and acting with respect, even when facing someone far more powerful than yourself. She had found her voice, and it was heard. Clearly, perfectly, and undeniably. Sheikh Omar sat back in his chair, still staring at Layla as she quietly returned to her duties. For the first time that day, he felt a strange discomfort. It wasn't physical, it was the unease of realizing that someone he had dismissed as ordinary was, in fact, remarkable. All morning, he had assumed that wealth, status, and power were enough to command respect. Yet here was a young waitress, barely older than 25, speaking in flawless Arabic, commanding attention with words that carried meaning, intelligence, and dignity. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and studied her carefully. There was a calmness in her movements, a quiet confidence that didn't depend on his approval. Unlike other staff who had worked for him, she didn't flinch at his harsh tone or fake a smile to appease him. She had spoken truthfully and respectfully, something he had rarely experienced. It made him pause. Her words from moments ago repeated in his mind. True greatness is measured by how you treat the people around you. Those who serve, those who care, and those who trust you. The Sheikh frowned. They were simple words, but they carried a force that money could never buy. He realized that his behavior earlier had been unnecessary and cruel. He had humiliated her, tested her patience, and yet she had not crumbled. Instead, she had responded with intelligence and dignity, turning the situation on its head. Omar's assistants noticed the change in his demeanor. He was usually quick to dismiss, quick to scold, and quick to command obedience. Today, however, he seemed to be thinking, reflecting something unusual for a man of his status. One assistant whispered nervously, "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't respond immediately. His eyes followed Layla as she moved gracefully among the tables, serving other guests with precision and poise. Every motion she made seemed deliberate, confident, and professional. He realized he had underestimated her. She wasn't just a waitress. She was educated, poised, and intelligent. The way she spoke in perfect Arabic was proof of that. Many of the people in his circle struggled with the language or had heavy accents, yet here was a young woman who spoke fluently, politely correcting the arrogance of a billionaire with words that no money could buy. Omar's mind wandered to the life she must have led. How had someone like her acquired such skill and confidence? She didn't come from wealth or privilege. She worked hard, likely facing challenges that he could not imagine. The thought made him reflect on his own life. He had always relied on power, influence, and money to achieve what he wanted. He had assumed that these were enough to command respect, but Layla had shown him otherwise. He remembered her words about respect, kindness, and integrity. They were simple principles, yet he had often ignored them in the pursuit of wealth. And now, here was someone who had spoken these truths to him without fear, without arrogance, and without compromise. It was humbling, a feeling Omar rarely experienced. The Sheikh leaned back and exhaled slowly. He had seen many staff members in his life, people who smiled out of fear or flattery. But Layla had not done that. She had been honest, strong, and composed. That combination was rare, even among the highly educated or the privileged. And the fact that she was so young made it even more remarkable. Omar's thoughts began to shift. He realized that he had judged her by her appearance and occupation, assuming that she was inexperienced or insignificant. But in reality, she was capable, intelligent, and self-respecting. For the first time that day, he felt genuine admiration. Not just for her courage, but for her ability to remain calm under pressure, to communicate her truth eloquently, and to command attention without seeking to dominate. He looked around the restaurant briefly, noticing how other guests were observing the scene. Some were impressed, others curious, and a few were even inspired. But he knew that the true impact was not just on those who watched, it was on him. Layla had disrupted the power dynamic he had taken for granted. She had shown him that influence and respect were not automatically earned by wealth, but by character, courage, and intelligence. For a moment, he wondered how many other moments in his life he had missed because he relied too much on status and money. How many people like Layla had he dismissed? How often had he failed to recognize genuine talent and strength because it wasn't immediately obvious? The thought made him feel uncomfortable, but also awakened something new, a desire to see her true potential. He gestured to one of his assistants and asked quietly, Tell me about her. Where did she learn Arabic so well? The assistant looked surprised, unsure if the sheikh genuinely wanted to know. She studied languages, sir. She has worked here for 2 years, but she is very educated, he replied hesitantly. Omar's eyes returned to Layla as she served another table. There was a calmness in her that commanded respect, not fear. He realized that her intelligence and grace had already set her apart. In a world where people often bowed to wealth and power, she had achieved something far greater. She had earned respect through her own merit. He felt a shift inside himself, a subtle but profound change. He recognized that wealth alone could not make someone admirable, and arrogance could never command true loyalty or respect. What mattered were character, patience, intelligence, and the courage to speak truth politely but firmly. Layla embodied all of these qualities, and he couldn't help but feel both humbled and impressed. Omar finally spoke softly, almost to himself. She is remarkable. I misjudged her. His tone lacked the arrogance of before. Instead, there was an acknowledgement, a rare admission from a man of his power. He knew that this young woman, a simple waitress in appearance, had shown him something invaluable. That greatness is not measured by wealth, but by integrity, intelligence, and courage. He decided then that he wanted to know more about her story. Her life, her skills, and her experiences were clearly beyond what one could see in a uniform and apron. He wanted to understand how she had achieved such poise, what obstacles she had overcome, and how she had grown so strong. The realization left him thoughtful, almost reflective. Sheikh Omar al-Hamadi, used to commanding rooms and dominating conversations, had never been spoken to in such a way, and yet he was not angry. Instead, he was intrigued, humbled, and quietly impressed. Layla had not only held her ground but had forced him to reconsider his assumptions about people, power, and respect. For the first time that morning, he felt respect. Not because someone obeyed him, but because someone had earned it. And that respect was more powerful than anything he could buy. Sheikh Omar sat quietly at his table, his thoughts still revolving around the young woman who had so boldly spoken truth to him. For the first time that day, he felt an unfamiliar sense of humility. He had spent most of his life commanding attention and respect with his wealth and influence, but Layla had shown him that respect could not be bought. It had to be earned, and she had earned it in a way he could not ignore. He watched her move gracefully among the tables, serving other guests with quiet confidence. Each gesture she made was precise, polite, and professional, yet there was an unmistakable strength in the way she carried herself. He remembered the firmness in her voice when she had spoken in perfect Arabic, not confrontational, but commanding enough to make him pause and reflect. Her words had left a lasting impression on him, and he found himself replaying them silently in his mind. Omar realized that he had been wrong to belittle her earlier. His arrogance, a shield he had always carried proudly, now felt unnecessary and almost foolish. He had humiliated her publicly, but she had responded not with anger or tears, but with grace and intelligence. That realization made him feel a mixture of regret and admiration. He had underestimated her completely, and the humility of this realization struck him deeply. He gestured to one of his assistants, who approached cautiously. "Bring her here, please," he said quietly. The assistant looked startled but did not argue, knowing better than to question the sheikh's instructions. Layla, noticing the gesture, hesitated for a moment. She was unsure whether this was going to be another humiliation, but she trusted her composure. She approached the table slowly, keeping her head held high. "Layla," Sheikh Omar said, his voice calmer than before, free from the arrogance that had defined it earlier. "I owe you an apology." She blinked, taken aback. Apologies from someone like him were rare. Many of the people he commanded would never admit they were wrong, yet here he was acknowledging his mistake. She stayed composed, her expression polite but curious, waiting for him to continue. "I was wrong to speak to you as I did," he continued. "You are not just a waitress. You are intelligent, skilled, and capable. I misjudged you, and I humiliated you unnecessarily. For that, I apologize." Layla's heart raced. She had not expected an apology, but she didn't let it show. She nodded politely, keeping her voice calm. "Thank you, sir. I accept your apology." Her words were simple, yet they carried dignity, reflecting her strength in the face of adversity. The Sheikh leaned back in his chair, a reflective look in his eyes. "Tell me about yourself," he said softly. "I want to understand how someone like you, with so much talent and knowledge, is here working as a waitress. You have skills and intelligence that many of my colleagues would envy." Layla took a deep breath, realizing that this was her moment to speak honestly about her life, without fear. She began to tell him about her childhood, the loss of her father, and the responsibility she had taken on to care for her younger brother, Amir. She explained how she had worked multiple jobs to support him and how she had studied languages and self-educated herself in her spare time. The Sheikh listened intently, genuinely interested. He had expected to dismiss her story quickly, but instead, he found himself moved by her resilience and determination. Each word she spoke revealed a depth of character he had not anticipated, and he realized that she had endured hardships with a grace and strength he could only admire. By the time she finished, the mood at the table had shifted completely. What had begun as an encounter filled with humiliation and arrogance had transformed into a conversation marked by respect and understanding. Sheikh Omar's assistants, who had been watching nervously, now exchanged surprised glances. They had never seen him treat anyone with such genuine attention and interest, especially someone he had initially looked down upon. Omar cleared his throat and smiled faintly, a rare and genuine smile that softened his usually stern features. "I see now," he said, "that I judged you based on appearances and assumptions. I failed to recognize your talents and your strength. That was my mistake." Layla nodded once, her expression calm. She could sense the sincerity in his words. She had always believed that patience and dignity would eventually be recognized, and now that belief was being confirmed. The Sheikh reached into his pocket and handed her his business card. "Contact my office tomorrow," he said. "I would like to discuss opportunities for you, education, work, and anything that matches your skills. You deserve more than this job. I want to help you reach your potential." Layla's eyes widened slightly in surprise. She had never expected such a generous offer, especially from someone who had insulted her so openly just moments ago. Her heart raced with excitement and disbelief. She nodded politely, keeping her composure, and said, "Thank you, sir. I truly appreciate it." Omar smiled again, his expression showing genuine respect. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "I want to see what you can achieve with proper support. You have the talent, and now you will have the opportunity." The restaurant, which had been tense and silent during the encounter, began to return to its usual hum. Other guests whispered among themselves, curious about the change in atmosphere. Some watched Layla with newfound admiration, seeing her not just as a waitress but as a woman who had stood her ground and earned recognition from one of the most powerful men in the city. Layla returned to her duties, her hands steady but her mind racing. The morning's events had changed everything. What had begun as humiliation had turned into validation and opportunity. She realized that courage, intelligence, and patience had not only protected her dignity, but had also opened doors she had never imagined. As she moved among the tables, she reflected on the strange twists of life. One moment, she had been belittled and humiliated. The next, she was being recognized for her skills and offered a chance to grow. The lesson was clear. Strength, patience, and integrity could transform even the harshest situations into opportunities. Sheikh Omar continued to watch her from his table, a thoughtful expression on his face. For the first time, he saw beyond appearances and recognized the true value of a person's character. Layla had taught him an unexpected lesson, that wealth and power could not define greatness, but courage, intelligence, and dignity could. The encounter that morning had begun with tension, arrogance, and humiliation, but it ended with understanding, respect, and the promise of a brighter future. Layla had faced her challenges with patience and strength, and in doing so, she had not only preserved her dignity but had also changed the heart of a billionaire. By the end of the morning, Layla felt a strange mixture of relief, excitement, and disbelief. The events that had begun with humiliation had now taken a turn she could never have imagined. Sheikh Omar al-Hamadi, a man whose presence usually commanded fear and obedience, had not only apologized but had extended an extraordinary offer. For the first time, Layla felt that her courage, patience, and intelligence were truly recognized, and that recognition carried the potential to change her life forever. After the initial apology, the Sheikh had invited her to speak privately, away from the other staff and guests. Layla had followed, her steps steady but her heart racing. She kept her calm exterior, though her mind swirled with questions and anticipation. She wondered what kind of opportunity someone like Sheikh Omar could offer a young waitress. Would it be a job, an investment, a chance to study? She did not know, but she prepared herself mentally to listen carefully and respond with gratitude and professionalism. The private room was quiet, luxurious, and surprisingly comfortable. The rich aroma of coffee lingered in the air, and the sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sheikh Omar gestured for her to sit. Layla lowered herself into the chair, keeping her posture upright and her hands folded politely in her lap. She noticed for the first time that the man who had seemed so arrogant and unapproachable earlier was now observing her with genuine curiosity and respect. "Layla," he began, his tone calm, almost conversational. "I have spent a lifetime acquiring wealth, power, and influence. I have had people obey me, flatter me, and even fear me. But today, you have taught me something far more valuable than money, something I have rarely experienced. Courage, intelligence, and dignity." Layla listened quietly, her heart beating fast. She had hoped to be recognized for her professionalism, but hearing such words from a man like Sheikh Omar was beyond anything she had imagined. She offered a polite nod, showing respect without arrogance. "I want to give you an opportunity that matches your skills," he continued. "I see potential in you that cannot be measured by your current position. I want to sponsor your further education, help you develop your skills in business and languages, and introduce you to people who can support your growth. You have the talent to achieve great things, Layla, and I want to ensure nothing holds you back." Her mind raced. This was more than a simple job offer. It was a life-changing opportunity. Education, mentorship, financial support. Everything she had ever dreamed of for herself and her brother was suddenly within reach. She felt a swell of gratitude but kept her expression composed, not wanting to appear overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I am truly grateful for your generosity and trust. I will do my best to make the most of this opportunity." Sheikh Omar smiled faintly. "I believe in results, but I also believe in potential. You have already demonstrated strength, intelligence, and patience beyond your years. That is why I chose to offer this to you. Many people with wealth and influence never learn the lessons you have already shown me." As they spoke, Layla thought about her brother, Amir, and how proud he would be of her. The years of struggle, the sacrifices she had made, and the nights spent studying and learning had not been in vain. She realized that every small effort, every moment of perseverance, had led to this turning point. Over the next hour, Sheikh Omar outlined the details of the offer. He would fund her education, arrange private tutoring in advanced business management, and introduce her to a network of influential people who could mentor her. He also suggested opportunities for practical experience within his companies, giving her a chance to learn hands-on while developing her own professional identity. Layla listened carefully, taking mental notes. Each detail made the reality sink in more deeply. She thought about her family, especially Amir, and how this opportunity could change both their lives. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future she had never dared to dream of. A life where she was not defined by circumstance, but by her skills, intelligence, and determination. Sheikh Omar noticed the light in her eyes and spoke again. "I understand that you may feel overwhelmed, Layla, but I assure you, this is not about favor or charity. It is about recognizing talent and giving it a chance to flourish. You have earned this not by asking, but by demonstrating who you truly are." The sincerity in his voice left a lasting impression. Layla realized that this moment was not just about receiving support, it was about acknowledgement and respect. She had been treated unfairly earlier, but now she was being seen for who she really was. A capable, intelligent, and resilient woman. When the meeting concluded, Sheikh Omar stood and offered his hand. "Welcome to a new chapter in your life, Layla. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish." She shook his hand firmly, a mix of respect, gratitude, and quiet triumph in her expression. As she walked out of the private room and back into the main restaurant, Layla felt a profound sense of transformation. Her colleagues noticed the difference in her demeanor. A quiet confidence, a sense of pride, and a lightness that had been absent before. She realized that courage, patience, and intelligence had led her to this moment. The guests in the restaurant had no idea what had happened behind closed doors, but Layla knew that her life had changed forever. She returned to her duties, serving coffee and meals with the same professionalism as before, but now there was an unspoken sense of empowerment in her movements. Every step reminded her that she had faced adversity, stood her ground, and emerged stronger. That morning, she had turned humiliation into opportunity, arrogance into respect, and a routine shift into a life-changing moment. Sheikh Omar had not only recognized her talent, but had offered her a future that promised growth, learning, and achievement beyond her wildest dreams. Layla realized that true success was not about wealth or status. It was about courage, integrity, and the ability to act with dignity even when others tried to diminish you. She had faced the challenge, spoken her truth, and claimed her respect. And in doing so, she had opened the door to a future full of possibilities. Walking out of the restaurant later that day, Layla felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She thought about Amir, about her struggles, and about the years of hard work that had prepared her for this moment. She knew that her life was no longer limited by circumstance. She had been seen, acknowledged, and given a chance to thrive, and she would not waste it. For Layla, the day had begun like any other, with ordinary tasks and ordinary challenges. But it ended with a transformation that would shape the rest of her life. Courage, patience, and intelligence had changed her destiny, proving that true power does not belong to wealth alone. It belongs to those who dare to stand tall and speak their truth.